Hi everybody, and I am Tony E. at ShowIP Interface Brief, and welcome to day 31.5. I'm calling it 31.5. I'm not actually going to increment today because I'm not doing any study today. Instead, I'm doing review, and also I am going to try and build out my lab a little differently to prepare myself for next weekend, which is going to be a little different topology and a little different lab style and a different day. So if anyone's following along, next weekend will be a Sunday live lab. Saturday, I have some family business to take care of. So I wanted to review last Saturday's lab. It was a long lab. It took me 8 hours to get through it. This is a lab that I had done the week prior, and I failed miserably. Now, there is no real scoring, and there are no points awarded. It is scoring based on the honor system. There is an answer key, and some of the stuff just sort of needs to be derived. But I try to score myself as harshly as the CCIE grading system is, or as I've been told, and through my experience in doing the Cisco expert level, the Cisco 360 lab, the scoring engine there is pretty tough. So if I miss a single bullet point in a subsection, I do not get the points for that section. Now, again, there's no real point value. It is honor system only, but I've made a big improvement over what I did last time. So over to my left is my old results, and over to my right is my papers with my new results. So I went ahead and went through the answer key, graded myself, and just kind of gave myself check marks on whether or not I got points for the section, and then I just made myself some notes for a couple of things. So I was definitely surprised on a couple of the things that I missed. I was definitely surprised because I thought I had gotten them. Now, I did this lab a week ago, right? And this was my second attempt this past weekend. So I did look at the answer key after I did it my first time. And I just want to be clear that just because I looked at an answer key doesn't mean I automatically get everything right the next time. In fact, at some parts, it actually made it more difficult because there were things that I knew I got right the time before, and I wasn't sure how to execute this time. And so I was sort of questioning myself, like, what did I do last time? How did I solve that last time? I know I got it right. And so I ended up spinning my wheels, thinking about what I did the time before instead of thinking about how to execute it as if it was brand new for me now. So doing the lab previously and previously looking at the answer key definitely didn't give me that big of a jump. However, I will say that I will not be doing this lab again for a very long time because doing this lab the second time, I did feel very familiar with it. Like I knew how the protocols were going to react. I knew sort of what some of the problems were already because I had solved them a week ago. So I want to make sure if I ever do this lab again, which I should because technically I failed the lab. If I ever do it again, I want to make sure lots of time has passed between now and the next time I do it. And I'm not talking about like a week or two. I mean like many months. Maybe I'll circle back around and try this lab. By the end of this 100 lab journey, I should be able to do these 3 foundation labs, which come out of the INE CCIE Route and Switch V5 workbook. They have 3 foundation labs in there. After 100 days of labbing, I should be able to circle back around and hit these labs no problem. If I can do that, I will feel successful. If I can't do that, then I know I have a lot more work ahead of me. It doesn't mean I'm a failure. It just means I have a lot more work ahead of me. So let's get to the results. Section 1, troubleshooting, says there was one fault with the initial configuration that must be resolved. The very first time I did this, I did not get this Correct. I did not resolve this problem. In fact, it was a complete surprise to me when I saw what it was. And then I had an epiphany of how that very first fault caused me trouble all throughout the topology. So this time, I went ahead and solved it first and foremost. I knew exactly what it was. It was one small thing. This was one instance where actually looking at the answer key ahead of time actually gave me sort of a cheating advantage. I knew exactly where it was. I knew exactly what the problem was, and so I targeted it first. It was the first thing to solve. But that can't hold true for all the next sections. The LAN switching section, which I gave myself credit for on the very first time. I had solved it on the very first time. I gave myself 0 points on this most recent time because I missed a very something that I feel like is very crucial. And my notes here that I wrote myself as I was grading it was, I missed a couple of links and I missed a couple of ports that should not have been negotiated. And so there were times when it says, configure switch 3's links to switch 1 and switch 4 as 802.1q trunks. Ensure that these trunk links are dynamically negotiated. And so I did that. I made sure one side was desirable and left the other side as auto. That'll give us a trunk. And the correct answer that they wanted in the answer key was desirable and desirable. So because I graded myself harshly, I gave myself a 0 for that, and that was kind of disappointing. The next section was Ether channel, and the section after that was VTP. On the originals, when I took it 2 weeks ago, I gave myself 0s for both of those sections. This time around, I gave myself full credit for them. I was able to hit all of the points. In fact, during the gap between my first attempt and my second attempt, I studied and labbed a couple of these topics and the theories. So I was well prepared exactly for this lab, for this section of the lab. And it felt really good. It felt really good to be able to execute that based on previous experience. So again, the answer key didn't necessarily help me. I didn't memorize the configs or anything. The bullet points that you need to execute are right here in front of you as tasks. But the theory behind them, what it was asking, you need to be able to derive that information. And I was able to do that this time. So very good. Last time I gave myself, I think, credit for spanning tree, although I was unsure about one thing. And this time I was fully correct. I think I was fully correct on spanning tree. I gave myself full credit. At least that's my scoring here. I scored myself Saturday night, so here we are Monday night. Okay, the next section is spanning tree. Also, big section. There was one thing that I didn't do and I gave myself 0 points for, and that was the very last bullet point here. It says shut down all unused ports between the switches. Because I don't know if I solved my spanning tree section properly, left some ports in states that I didn't feel like spending the time to verify. So I went ahead and skipped the shut down all unused ports. And by skipping that single bullet point, actually gave me a 0 for the entire section, even though I solved 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bullet points. By not doing the final task, you get 0 points. So I gave myself a 0 for that section, and that was pretty sad. In fact, the same thing that I got stuck on my original time, I also got stuck on this time, which was configure switch 2 and switch 4 so that switch 2 transits switch 4 to reach switch 3 instead of using port channel 23. And I think the solution to that was duplex. And I don't deal with duplex very often. Almost everything is full duplex or auto negotiation, and I never have a problem with it. But I understand the importance of understanding the foundations and the theory behind the things that will affect your switching topologies. So I understand the importance of drilling duplex. I missed it on this. I gave myself 0 points. The layer 3 ether channel was very easy to do. 3 easy bullet points. That was a gimme. Anyone should be able to solve that from CCNA all the way up. No problem there whatsoever. The next section is layer 2 security. I gave myself a 0 initially on the original test. This test, I gave myself full credit. I was able to solve it. This was one of the things that I drilled throughout the week, one of the things I studied, one of the things I labbed up throughout the week. So I was fully prepared for this section when it came up in the test. So awesome. DMVPN. Reaching the DMVPN section in these topologies, in these foundation labs, is sort of a milestone if you ask me. All the previous sections are layer 2 stuff. Find a fault and then also layer 2 stuff. Spanning tree, trunking, port security, that type of stuff. When you reach the DMVPN section is when you really get to the layer 3. I love when I get to this point because typically DMVPN is one of the central points of the topology. And so naturally you have to build it first before you can layer in all of the other connections that go across the network. And because I have worked DMVPN early on in my studies, the first week and a half of the 100 days journey, I focused on DMVPN alone. I gave myself full credit last time because I got every single topic, and I gave myself full credit this time, got every single topic. Very happy about that. The next section was RIP v2. I gave myself full credit last time. I also got full credit this time. I don't want anyone to ever skip RIP in their studies. Never think that because it's an old protocol and you probably won't see it in production and you probably don't use it except for a few corner cases where some people have some old networks. Don't ever think that you can skip over it. There are some tricky aspects to it, and you need to know how to manipulate the routes, the prefixes, and do all of the different layers of filtering with them. And that is true across all of the protocols. Okay, but make sure you don't skip RIP or that you don't dedicate enough time to it. Make sure you dedicate plenty of time to RIP, because your efforts in dedicating time to RIP, the things that you learn on prefix manipulation and prefix filtering and neighbor filtering and everything that's involved in manipulating prefixes establishes that strong foundation for you to build on for OSPF and EIGRP and BGP and anything else that you move on to. So make sure you give RIP some time, okay? One of the things I got myself stuck on last time was called the RIP v2 continued. It was a single bullet point, and it was using BFD. BFD was one of the things I drilled this past week in between attempts. I drilled BFD. Now, granted, I don't consider myself a BFD expert, but I will say if you want me to configure BFD between two routed devices and register the routing protocol, I can say I can confidently do that in its, I don't know, most basic form. So I got full credit for that this time, so that wasn't a 0. So I've made a lot of improvements here. The next section was OSPF, and then the following section was OSPF. I had given myself full credit on the original attempt, and again, full credit here. So I'm feeling pretty strong on the foundations of my routing protocol experience, my skill level, my knowledge, my theory. I feel pretty strong on these. I'm getting full credit on a lot of these. I'm very happy about it. I'm lacking on this layer 2, which is a little surprising because typically I'm stronger than most in layer 2. Now, I don't work in a data center job where I'm working with switching all the time. I don't know why I always equate data center with switching. I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't make that assumption. But in my day-to-day, I don't deal with big Nexus switches or access switches or the access distribution core layer, you know, that Cisco sells. I don't really deal with it, but I am pretty well versed in basic switching technologies, port security, and a lot of the protocols, but there's always something I miss. There's always something I miss. So anyhow, the layer 3 protocols, I'm doing great. The last section on this page is OSPF v3 for IPv4. So they want us to implement OSPF v3 for IPv4, not IPv6 initially. I had to give myself a 0 for that section previously because it was calling out use of BFD, and I didn't execute that last time. But because I drilled it this week, I was able to do exactly what they needed to meet the requirement using BFD this time. So I gave myself full credit for that. I felt really good at this point. That was an entire page of 6 sections or subsections with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29. 29 straight bullet points, executed all of them. That feels really good. At that point, I'm rocking and rolling. I'm ready to go. In fact, I think at that point, I took a break last time. The next section is EIGRP. Although it's still in the layer 3 sort of routing section, I think I did take a break this past time. EIGRP. Originally, I had to give myself a 0 because because I didn't understand kind of exactly what it was asking me, and I wanted to be fully transparent with myself. This time, because I had drilled some of these things throughout the week, the EIGRP section, I gave myself full credit. I was very happy about that. The next section is redistribution. And when you look at this, if anyone's performing this lab, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different redistribution points in the network, which is just from one protocol into another protocol, into another protocol, into another protocol. It's maddening. I'm not sure how to interpret my graded results from my first attempt, because I have like a 0 drawn here, then I have it X'd out, then I have an X over something, and I have some check marks. But I will say on this time, my most recent time, I gave myself a 0. Although I executed all of the redistribution bullet points and I checked them all off, I put in here, I performed all of the steps, but I missed a crucial theory, a theory point. I was scribbling notes, so they're not very clear. When redistributing, you'll miss the connected networks. And that's something I want to kind of go back and lab up a couple of times, just to make sure that anytime someone asks me to redistribute something from one thing into another, I will automatically see this as something that needs to happen. It will just be part of the vernacular for me. All right, so I gave myself a 0 on this past test. The next was exterior gateway protocol routing, is the IBGP. I had full credit last time, IBGP. I took a little bit of time on it my very first time because there was a couple of things I was questioning, but because of that experience and plowing through it the first time, it made doing it a second time even easier. The IBGP section, I blew right through it, full credit, all the bullet points, easy peasy. The next section is eBGP. And again, I blew through that, 5 bullet points, relatively easy. I think it was just 2 routers. It was just eBGP in one section of the network with 5 bullet points. So pretty easy. The next section was on my very first attempt. MPLS was the label exchange. And for that, I missed something, so I needed to give myself a 0, which was use the fewest number of commands to set up label exchange between the DMVPN routers. I didn't know what that was at the time. Since I saw the answer key, I learned it, I've tried it, I labbed it up throughout this week. I mean, guys, that's the importance of what I do here. That's the importance of this journey. I don't know if anyone follows the Lab Every Day hashtag on Twitter. I'm sure it's on other social media platforms as well. But that's what it's really about labbing every day, about pushing yourself through the paces. That's what this 100 Days of Labbing is about. People sometimes ask me, Tony, what are you going to lab next week? You know, how can I follow along? How can I lab with you? What topics are you going to cover? Sometimes I have those planned out. Sometimes I don't. And more often than not, I don't. What determines what I lab this upcoming week is actually going to be the things that I struggled on my foundation labs. And I call them foundation labs because that's what I'm doing now. Soon I will evolve to the troubleshooting and then finally the full-scale labs, as well as some other large-scale labs. So I drilled this throughout the week, and I got some hands-on experience with it, which really helped me out. The next section was VRF provisioning. On my very first test, this is where I got stuck. I spent way too much time on it. I work with VRFs all the time, all day. And And this should have been easy, easy, easy for me. But what got me hung up last time was the very last bullet point, which was pinging, verifying some reachability. And I didn't get that my very first time. And that goes back to the very first troubleshooting problem of the lab. So because I knew that ahead of time, I was able to solve that this time. And even I got stuck on it this time. Even the same thing got me stuck. There was something wrong with the lab. I'm not sure what it was. I'm not blaming EVNG. I'm not blaming the images. I have only to blame for myself because I had been labbing for many, many hours when this hit me. And I got stuck. So from my very first lab, I didn't make it past this point. But in my current lab, I did. In my current lab, I plowed through all the way to the end, which was really an uplifting feeling just to be able to see the finish line and walk past it. Albeit I had to take a couple of zeros. I did walk across the finish line. Even though technically this was a failed lab, there was a lot to be learned here. The next section was PE to CE routing, full credit for that. The next section was configure VPN for Exchange. So actually, when I was configuring this and while I was building it, I had worked it and troubleshot it and couldn't figure out why it was working. And then I just kind of marked it in parentheses and put a question mark. Like, I don't know what I did wrong, but I need to go back and review this. After I reviewed the answer key, I actually got this section right, which was a little surprising, but I actually got it right. The following two sections, which was VPN routing policy and MPLS backup routing, I skipped. I read over the bullets and just said to myself, I don't know how to do that off the top of my head, and I don't want to waste my time trying to figure it out. So I skipped those sections and gave myself big fat zeros for them. That was a strategical decision. I don't know if skipping sections like that is encouraged in the lab, right? It's not encouraged, obviously, but if you're going to get stuck on something, do you just skip it or do you go down the rabbit hole? So I went ahead and skipped it, thinking that if this was a real lab and if I had extra time, I could go back and work on it. So in the effort to save time and energy, I skipped those sections, gave myself zeros. I'm not happy about it, but it was strategic. And that bumped me on to the next section, which was IPv6 DMVPN over IPv6 transport. I labbed the DMVPN to hell my first week and a half of 100 days of labbing. I did DMVPN over IPv6. I knew I could grab this. I knew it was easy points. I just reach out there and grab it. And I did, and I got full credit for that. So I'm very happy I did. Otherwise, I'd have been spinning my wheels on this other section over here, not knowing what to do. The next was IPv6 OSPF v3. So I configured all of this, I thought, correctly, but there was something that I missed there, and it was the last bullet point. It says, ensure that the can reach. I guess it means routers. I think there's a missing word here in the lab. Ensure that the routers can reach each other's loopbacks without passing through the hub. Don't use the NHRP shortcuts. Typically, I would use the IP NHRP shortcut, or in this case, IPv6 NHRP shortcut to achieve that. It says don't use the shortcuts. And I didn't think about why this would work. But actually, so I got this section wrong because I missed this bullet point. And this was something very cool that I also made a note under here, need to lab up. So there's about 3 things from this lab that I'm actually going to lab up throughout the week. And that's how I determine what I'm going to do throughout the week. I'm going to do IPv6 DMVPN, and I'm going to do specifically this bullet point because I want to see it. I'm also going to do... I'm just thumbing through the pages. I'm also going to do the redistribution with connected networks that I had missed before. And then something else I'm going to lab up is something. I don't know. Trying to review my notes in a hurry. The next thing is IPv6 IPsec. I got this. This was between the DMVPN spokes. So I got all of these points. I hit all of the configs. I'm very proud of it. Got them, right? They're an easy grab. Just configure it and do it up. The next one was an IPv6 site-to-site. I did not complete that. In fact, I skipped that as well, marking it as 0 for myself. So overall, how did I do? Overall, I failed. I failed the lab. If I'm treating this like a real lab, I actually don't know what the scoring metric would be, but I would say I failed the lab. I skipped too many sections. I skipped 3 sections, was a hard skip. Didn't even try, skipped them to save time. And there were a couple of sections where I earned zeros that I actually spent a lot of time configuring. And that was 1, 2, 3, 3 sections, 4 sections that I actually configured that I earned zeros. So that means I put in the time and earned zeros. That's 7 zeros altogether. Thinking about that number like that makes it pretty terrible. I don't actually know how many subsections there are total. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. Okay, so I got 7 zeros out of 28 sections. That's a 75%. Actually, I kind of never thought of it like that. I never thought about sort of grading myself that way. 75%. That's not too bad. Lots of room for improvement, though, and that's what I'm excited about. So I'm excited about sort of taking this to the next step, and throughout this week, I'm targeting some of these things where I earned zeros before. And again, I don't think there's any silver bullet way to do this, right? There's a lot of people who are out there studying for CCNA, CCNP, and CCIE, and some of the sort of motivational comments hold true for all of them. You got to put in the work. You got to do it. You got to put hands on keys. You have to do it. You can't just read about it. You got to be about it. So that's exactly why we do this 100 Days Journey. It's about documenting the entire process and holding yourself accountable for your own time, which is why I'm not counting today as a study day. I didn't study before starting this stream, and after the stream, I'm not going to study. I'm actually going to do a little side project that will hopefully enhance my lab upcoming this weekend. So I will actually start studying tomorrow on Tuesday. But it was a fun lab, guys. I'm having so much fun doing these labs. Although last time I did this lab, the very first time, I was really beat up. I was really depressed because I didn't even finish. I was hours away from completing, and I just was getting beat up, and it wasn't happening. Hey, mentors, thanks for joining us, man. I appreciate it. It was really a lot of fun. I don't know if anyone else is out there labbing with me. I think Mentors is out there labbing with me. We're having a great time on Saturdays. By the way, Mentors, next weekend will be Sunday. Okay, Sunday we will be labbing. And then I think I'm going to bounce to a Saturday, and then it'll be Sundays from then on, starting in September. So it's going to be Sunday, Saturday, and then all Sundays, I believe. I'll try to keep everyone posted on my schedule. Anyhow, these labs are great, man. In fact, I'm using these labs not so much for me to like take the test and grade myself and say like I'm ready for the CCIE. Instead, I'm using them as a way to uncover the topics that I don't know, right? Because if I just sit here and build my own labs and study my own material, I'm really just going to be circling around the things that I do know. This is going to be, but by doing someone else's labs, by doing an organized lab with hard requirements, it makes you sort of step up to the plate. And there's an answer key to this that allows you to follow along. Now, I encourage all of you, if you are going to do this work, you're going to put it in the time. Look, it took me 8 hours to do this lab. And the stream before, it took me 10 hours to do this same lab, and I was hours away from completing. Hours and hours away. I wasn't even close. If you're going to put in the time to do these, grade yourself harshly. Be true to yourself. Grade yourself harshly. And the reason is, the harder you are on yourself, the less you will be surprised on the grade you get at the CCIE lab. I hear a lot of people thinking that they walk away from there thinking they might have done okay, and this, that, and the other, and they found out they weren't close. So I'm trying to be extra hard on myself here, so when I go and sit for the lab, there is no shock factor. We have a lot of stuff to do, but I use these to uncover the things that I don't know to help me focus my study. And that proved fruitful this time, right? For the things I didn't know the first time around, I studied them throughout the week, and I came back and executed on this material, and it felt great. And again, after this 100 days of labbing, maybe the last couple of days or maybe afterwards, I'm going to circle back around. I don't know if I'll do this lab. I hope that I will. But I would do the foundation labs again, and I hope they're just a breeze for me at the time. What kind of sucks that I'm kind of dreading is these labs take a long time. They really do take a long time. They take all day. And I am giving up an entire day of every weekend, you know, for the next 100 days. It's a lot. It's a lot for my family to put up with, a lot for me to put up with. And, you know, if it wasn't for people like mentors who's joining me on stream right now, and some of the other people in the community who really help encourage me to keep going, I really appreciate that. And I hope that my efforts here in documenting this journey and people seeing my struggle and you know, what will I have to push forward to go through these difficult times, I hope that's enough to help push all of you forward. The stronger I can become, the stronger you all can become as well. And we only do that through getting hands-on and getting our time at the key. So let's do that. I'm going to wrap this up, guys. This was a great lab. I recommend everybody going and getting the INE workbook. The INE workbook is full of, I don't know how many labs. I think someone said in Discord it has 500 labs in it. I don't know if it has 500 labs. I can tell you that it has a ton of labs, and there's no one that is just going to breeze through them, okay? There are a lot of labs there, and there's always something to be learned. I haven't completed all of the advanced technology labs. I did most, and that's how the Land Tamer and I sort of, you know, virtually met each other, was doing labs online. And what led me to, at the back of their book, the wrap up to the book, the final chapters are these foundation labs, troubleshooting labs, and then full scale labs. INE even offers a fully graded proctor exam, I guess, that they do virtually. And that may be in the cards for me down the road. We'll see. There's a lot of free material. I say free materials. There's a lot of materials available online already to kind of give you this large lab feel. And so I'm going to be utilizing all of those resources throughout the rest of my 100 days. So I'm going to finish up the INE lab materials. After that, I might jump over to NARBIC materials, or I might squeeze in a couple of Cisco 360 lab or Cisco expert level labs. I think I will always call them Cisco 360 labs because that's how I was introduced to them. So I will start those, I don't know, a little down the road. Maybe next month we'll start some Cisco 360 stuff. They have really good materials. I've been through a number of the labs already. In fact, this is just going to be me exposing like how nerdy I am about this CCIE studying. I took some of the labs before, and they send you a score report via email and like your tasks and stuff. It gives you like a nice little PDF package. I was reading that package last night like it was a bedtime story. I was reading it just so I could be more familiar with the type of language that's involved in the CCIE lab. And that's another thing that we are gaining through doing these labs, is helping to understand the language used in the requirements section. So it's very interesting, you know, sort of how they outline some things and what the answers they want are. So it takes some getting used to, and that's what we're exposing ourselves to here. Anyhow, that's it, guys. That's my test. I got 7 big old fat zeros. I skipped 3 sections. I got 4 sections wrong out of 28. So that means I got 21 passing sections. I actually didn't think I did that well, but I will keep that in mind in grading ones in the future. Sort of just how to grade it per subsection and roll that way. So thank you all for joining me. I hope everyone continues to lab and have a good time. I'm having a killer time. I think our next labs will be the INE T-Shoot. They have some troubleshooting labs in the back of the workbook. Grab those, get those built. Those are some large topologies. Those are 24 devices, 20 routers, 4 switches. So So, you know, you got to beef up your machine. Whatever you're doing, beef it up, get it ready. And I think I'm going to do a troubleshooting lab next. Then after that, I might do a different routing and switching lab of some kind, and I might bounce back to a troubleshooting lab. So I think I'm going to kind of alternate between troubleshooting and route switch, just to kind of keep it fresh, So thank you all. Let's wrap this up and see ya.